Does sustainability equal commercial viability? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Does every incubator and accelerator need to be commercially viable? I don't think so. In the markets that we're operating in, I don't think so.
Yeah.
What does sustainability even mean?
Yeah.
The grant money, I mean, everyone's saying it will dry up. I think it shifts.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a well that goes dry. I think my first piece here is just to be authentic. Takes a village to raise a child. It's not.
Hi, this is the Startup Evangelist. My name is Daniel Kitwa, your host and friend. The Startup Evangelist is a platform focused on entrepreneurial conversations for the African context. Nothing is off limits. We talk about startup culture, startup ideas, and innovation, just to build understanding, knowledge, and partnerships around these topics. So I welcome you to subscribe, like, and share our content. Looking forward to journey with you on this. Thank you. Ariel is a seasoned professional in the impact investing and enterprise support landscape. In this conversation, we cover her origin journey, her work at Pollinate Impact and what they are doing to support incubators and accelerators, as well as trends and opportunities and how to be effective storytellers as entrepreneurs or support organizations. Thank you. Ariel, you have a rich history in the impact-focused and enterprise support space. If you were to summarize your origin story and how that has led you to the chair you're sitting on, what would that be?
Yeah. So I think one of the greatest and worst things about this whole kind of impact entrepreneurship space is how randomly we end up where we end up. I think it's not usually an aspirational career. You know, when you're a kid, you say you want to be an astronaut or you want to be a doctor or a lawyer. It's not like that. It's usually something we land in by accident. That needs to change, but I also landed up here by accident. And I actually studied anthropology. That's where I started. The first time I came to Kenya was for a field school in Kubifora in the way north of Kenya on the east side of Lake Turkana by the Ethiopian border, and was excavating some really cool 1.5 million year old fossils, and quickly realized that I was not going to pursue that because I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't want to be a researcher. I wanted to have more, I think, tangible results, rather than kind of searching for the age-old question of where do we come from. So when I graduated college in Washington, D.C., my sister actually really encouraged me to sort of find myself. She said, go volunteer somewhere. So I said, fine, if I'm going anywhere, I'm going to go back to Kenya. So I ended up just near Kariokor on the other side of town working at a rehabilitation center for street kids called Rescue Dada, which was really, really wonderful, very grassroots, very ground level realities. And that ended, so I went back to the US, kind of followed the American dream, got a house, I got a dog, I got a job. And that was great until I think I started getting itchy feet again. And I was like, okay, now.
How long was that?
So this was the time I was working for the Aspen Institute, and that was about 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
I was there in total. Maybe into like year 3, I started getting itchy feet, and I started looking. Okay. And I knew I wanted to get into more international relations. The Aspen Institute is a wonderful place, but it was very high level. When I compared it with my work at Rescue Dada, which was very grassroots, my work at Aspen was I felt very out of touch with.
It was like you moved from a contact sport to a non-contact.
yes. For sporting analogies, yes.
Yeah.
And so then I started looking, of course, as a Mzungu, looking for jobs
Yeah.
in Africa like that. I got very little traction, but I did. I got an offer to volunteer for this program in social entrepreneurship. There was an organization that was running immersion programs for U.S. college students in very rural villages in other parts of the world.
So like they do like placement for
Yes.
Okay.
For like in the U.S. like the summer term, so like June, July, August.
it's almost like internship focused on rural.
Correct. And they were getting credits for it and all of that, and they had their own curriculum. And they were living with homestays. We were in Kilifi. And no running water, no electricity, like very, very rural. And it was all focused around asset-based community development and how could you leverage the assets that the community has rather than focusing on what they lack and what they need, right? So that I got this offer, and I was like, oh, crap, well, I can't like quit my job. I have a mortgage to pay. I have a dog. I have all these, things that I have to figure out. And my boss was wonderful. She gave me a leave of absence and she said, just come back. And I said, okay, like I can do that. And that was the first time I was exposed to this concept of business meets development. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful. That's when I met my now husband. So that was kind of the final nail in the coffin, I would say, of that. So then after that 3 months, I went back. I did go back to the Aspen Institute. I stayed there for a while. Still wasn't getting any traction on the job front because I was like, okay, now this is real. Like this is where I want to be. I want to be on ground level realities. And couldn't get any traction. So I ended up taking a fellowship in India. So this is a very circuitous route. So, and again, it was a social enterprise, social business focused fellowship. It was targeted at mid-career professionals. It was 6 months in India. I was like, okay, I can ride for 6 months without totally going bankrupt. India is fairly, affordable. And that's how I met Intellicap. One of my co-fellows was actually working for the Sankalp Forum with Intellicap in Mumbai. I was based in Bangalore, but she said, I know you're trying to get back to Kenya, and these people are looking to expand their work in Kenya, so you should talk to them. So I didn't have a job description. I didn't have it. I thought I was getting on like an exploratory call with these people. It ended up being like a 2-hour interview.
Wow.
And then, before I know it, I was back in Kenya, and that's when I started the Sankalp Forum in Nairobi, expanding the work that they had started then in India around this convening space for the social entrepreneurship and impact business sector. Built that for 10 years, expanded that to West Africa, and really was able to see the ecosystem evolve in that time period. Some things evolved, some things stayed the same. And I think that was a wonderful way for me to kind of get a 360-degree perspective of what was happening in the space. Because and the Sankalp Forum is this kind of premier convening for impact investing and impact entrepreneurship in the region. It attracted everyone. It attracted entrepreneurs and impact investors and development practitioners and foundations and corporations, and like everybody kind of wanted a piece of this pie. International people, local people, people from across the continent, and that was really wonderful to be able to see that and to see the sort of the demand and the hunger for this transition. I mean decades and decades of dependence on aid and things, and moving towards a more entrepreneurial approach. The downside to Sankalp was, and one of the things that I really struggled with, is you're trying to serve so many different types of people with so many different demands that makes it really hard to add value in a very concrete way.
And I'm assuming even there are some like needs that are in conflict with each other, or like there's this push and pull.
Correct. Yes, 100%. And I mean, I think the beauty of something like Sankalp is that you have that diversity, but these tensions are very real to work through in terms of those tensions and those demands, competing demands sometimes. And I wasn't. I would say I was not really sort of kind of casually looking to see what was next. I had been there for 10 years. It's like, what's the next move? And what's funny is one of my colleagues at the time had come across this job description for Pollinate Impact, and she sent it to me. She's like, this was written for you. Like, you need to apply. And I looked at the job description. I was like, but they want someone based in the U.S. And I was like, I have no intention of going back to the U.S. I love Kenya. My husband is Kenyan. My kids are Kenyan. I have a wonderful support system. Like, life is good. So she said, don't worry about it. Just apply.
Yeah.
So I did. My folks actually came for Christmas. This was around the holidays. And my mom actually got really sick.
This was also through COVID.
This is right after COVID. So like end of 2022, beginning of 2023. Yeah. So my folks came for Christmas to spend the holidays here. My mom ended up getting COVID.
Wow.
And she has health complications. She's been immunocompromised. So we ended up like for 2 weeks in the hospital when these people called for an interview.
Wow.
And I was like, no, I can't. I'm dealing with too much. I can't. I'm not in the right state of mind. Sankalp was right around the corner. My mom was in the hospital. Yeah. It was like, no, I can't. And then like 3 months later, so I had written it off. I was like, okay, I'm sure they've hired someone by now. Yeah. 3 months later, so I get a ping on LinkedIn. I hope your mom is doing well. I'm like, these people haven't hired for this role yet. So anyway, the universe conspires. I'm a firm believer. So anyway, so the rest is history. So then that's how I ended up where I am now. I negotiated. I said, I'm not moving back to the U.S. And I said, if you want me to, this was the job was to build this community of impact incubators across Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia. I was like, how do you want me to do that from America? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I said, I'm not moving. And they said, okay, stay where you are. and yeah, so that was July of last year, and that I ended up in this new role.
Wow. So actually what I've picked up is, in a way, there are accidents, but there are no accidents. Like, sort of like you volunteered, you interned, you went to these fellowships, and for some reason, they ended up like connecting. The dots ended up connecting and led you to this to this space. Probably like if you are to now look back to it and say, are there things someone now who is starting can be more intentional if they want to, to join this space, which is maybe slightly more developed than when you started?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's a big area of need that we need to develop as an ecosystem. Yeah. We did, with Pollinate, we partnered with Oxford University late last year, early this year, to do this Purpose and a Paycheck series. And we asked the students who were there from Oxford, like, have you ever heard of impact incubation? And like, I think it was something like 60 or 70% of them said they had never even heard of it. So I think there's a real lack of awareness that there is a whole industry around it. So I think, unfortunately, there are few very purposeful channels to get people into this industry. So I think those channels, as an ecosystem and as Pollinate, we're looking at how we can build those opportunities better.
So I guess courses, trainings,
fellowship opportunities, internships, right? Like, how can we better create ties with universities and some of these organizations that are looking for talent? Like, there's so many brilliant people out there, but if they're not aware of the opportunities that are out there, it's really difficult to find them out. So, for young people who are looking to get into the space, I would say just talk to as many people as you can and ask around. I mean, the space is small. Everyone knows nobody is more than 2 degrees of separation, and somebody is inevitably always looking for help or for jobs or for experience. So I think as an ecosystem, there's a lot better work that we can do to create more opportunities for young people and to build better awareness that it's an amazing space to be in, and people are doing incredible things.
I think what you've said is quite interesting, because I think a lot of us realize that's a problem, but because we are always in, like, we have also other big fish to fry, we sort of like, we we always push it back and back. So it's good to see like there's an actual organization like Pollinate that is trying to brainstorm around how to actually be intentional around such sort of bridging those skills gap.
Because if we don't, the space will shrink.
Yeah.
Because what's happening is you see the same people recycling. They go from this organization to that organization and that organization, rather than bringing in fresh blood and fresh ideas.
Yeah.
The hard thing is it takes time to orient people to the space, to bring them up to speed, and that's an investment in time and effort on the employer side and that's tough. It's
and then the question is, who is paying for all this, right? Because it's if it's not Pollinate doing it, then as an employer, I wouldn't, right? I want someone who is already
ready to go, plug and
working
play
from Sunculp or somewhere, and just poach them and then you've also mentioned, I think, a couple of times Pollinate. So for everyone who is listening, who is Pollinate Impact? What is it trying to accomplish? Mission, purpose.
Awesome.
Yeah, you've mentioned Africa, India. How does it sort of come together?
Thanks. So Pollinate Impact is a network of impact incubators and accelerators across, for now, Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. We're really looking at better South-South channels of sharing, of co-creation, of collaboration to mature, and I would argue kind of revolutionize the incubation industry, so that the entrepreneurs and budding entrepreneurs are getting better support and better set up for success. The network itself launched fairly recently in September of last year. But prior to that, we were doing more kind of traditional capacity building, and we were incubating incubators is what we had called that for a couple of years, since around 2018, and had supported around 40 different budding incubators and accelerators across that global South corridor. But we realized, I think, that if you're only focused on capacity building and short-term capacity building, you're only providing incremental change instead of the transformation that the sector really needs. And for me, the beautiful part about Pollinate was being able to focus on one group of constituents. Unlike Sunculp, we had so many different types of people. But even within incubators and accelerators, there's so much diversity. There are ones that are supporting migrant and refugee populations. There are ones that are supporting the hockey stick, VC, attracting VC tech. There's ones that are supporting, the slower growth, kind of SME, slow and steady, SGBs, whatever you want to call them, zebras or whatever, in the ecosystem. And there's just such a vibrancy and diversity there, but they are all struggling with so many of the same challenges. And the more I dig in, the more I realize these are systemic issues that they're struggling with, and it's like we're setting up these structures that are preventing our own success, right? Like so when we talk about systems change and transformational change to better build this ecosystem, to me, for the incubators, it's how do we empower them with better agency? How do they deliver the programs that they want to deliver in the way they want to deliver them, rather than focusing on, how do we empower them and provide them agency to deliver their programs, to support these entrepreneurs in the way they know best? Because what's happening now and the way the system is functioning is most of these incubators, and whether you're in Abidjan or Accra or Nairobi or Lusaka or Mumbai or Manila or Jakarta, like 80 to 90% of these challenges are the same.
And they're also like, they are not very, in some cases they are more programmatic. They are not like,
correct,
day in, day out. They are sort of they have this time-based program, cohort.
Correct.
We all attack it, and then
Cohort-based, short-term focus, 3 months, 4 months. If you're lucky, you get funded a 6-month program.
Yeah.
And the funding is coming from, these development institutions that are, yes, they're looking for economic and social impact, but ultimately they're the ones funding the incubation program. So it's very transactional. You go incubator, deliver this program in this amount of time to meet these development goals. So the funders are pulling on one end and paying for it. The entrepreneurs are supposedly the beneficiaries, but you're sort of, what ends up happening is they're trying to plug in entrepreneurs that will suit those development goals rather than developing a program to meet the entrepreneur's needs.
Then you get like entrepreneurs who are in multiple.
You have the hub hoppers.
Yeah.
In West Africa, they call them butterflies. It's very nice. They're like, go from this flower to that flower.
That's a nice.
It's a nice analogy.
A much nicer way of.
But and that's not so much a problem.
Yeah.
Provided that they're growing.
Yeah.
The problem becomes when it's cyclical and they're getting the same support. How many times can you build a pitch deck or a financial model?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And again, we're just spinning our wheels. And if you look at it from a larger perspective, then I think Village Capital had done some research on what it costs to run an effective incubation program. So I don't remember the number, but if we say that's $20,000 or $10,000 to incubate an entrepreneur. If you look at the amount of resources, if someone's going through 5, 7, 10 programs, forget prize money or grant money, just the resources that are going in to incubate a single entrepreneur who's gone through so many programs, how many resources have that inadvertently taken away from other people? And that's what I'm saying, like the incubators are in this tension of... they don't necessarily have the agency because they need to make the funder of the program happy.
They need to pay salaries.
They need to pay salaries. They need
rent,
to keep the lights on. But ultimately, it takes a long time to build a business. You can't do that in 3 months or 4 months. And you can't do that for pennies on the dollar. So where the incubation industry really wants to do more bespoke programming and one-on-one needs-based assessment, the reality is most often they're forced to do generic one size fits all because that's more cost effective. And that's when we end up with sort of this churn of entrepreneurs going from program to program and not really making so much success. But in some senses the hands are tied of those incubators. And so when I talk about the system, that's the system that we're really trying to change, and the only way we can do that is with a collective effort. Right? Because as individual incubators and individual ESOs or accelerators, your agency is limited. But as soon as it's not just one,
and
it's
then
hundreds.
you can hide, like, because these are some of these messaging is quite like, for lack of a better word, like it's more like you're doing advocacy to the person paying you, and you don't want a backlash, right? So you probably want a Pollinate umbrella that has those relationships to advocate for you as an incubator or ESO.
100%. Because one incubator is not going... I have one here in Kenya who I think the incubator, the funder wanted to fund, I think it was like a 4-month program, they wanted to support 40 entrepreneurs for something like $100,000. Wow. And the incubator was like, genuinely, this can't be done. This type of budgets, this volume, this short of time frame. But they're going to take the money. Maybe they'll negotiate down to 30 enterprises, but that's still too...
Then you end up having having 2 webinars, and like you sort of like make it very light touch, virtual, and it's
a lose-lose for everyone in that situation. The funder is absolutely not going to meet the development targets they set out. The entrepreneur is not going to get any value for the program. And now the incubator has just put out 30 or 40 people in the world to say, oh yeah, such and such incubator, I know them. Yeah, it was okay. So they're taking the reputational risk, and it's not that they couldn't do better. They 100% could have done better. But they don't have the means, the capacity to do so. So, and that kind of lies at the heart of the problem.
Interesting. So So you've mentioned pollinates and what you're trying to solve. And then I saw these three buzzwords: connection, collaboration, co-creation. Maybe unpack them and, in light of what you've mentioned in terms of the problem we are already facing.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, those three: connection, collaboration, co-creation, that's really at the heart of the network and the community, and that community building within the network is based on trust, it's based on mutual respect, and it genuinely comes from a place of this mentality of abundance versus the mentality of scarcity. So, launching working groups to address some of these challenges, and we're working on a few that are not, I wouldn't want to sort of publicly announce anything because it's a bit early, but actually ideas and solutions that are coming from the incubators themselves, and empowering them, backing some of these ideas to figure out how can we actually put these tools and resources out to the ecosystem to help them do their work better. The advocacy role that we can play of providing evidence behind this and backing this. And again, that has to come from the community. That has to be a collective effort, because until we have substantial evidence to prove, these anecdotal evidence to say, yes, it's not one incubator in Kenya struggling with this paradigm. It's hundreds or thousands across this massive geographic spread. That's the only way we're going to do that. So those kind of three pillars is what we expect from our members, and what we hope they're both giving and receiving in equal measure, because you have to put some goodwill in the bank to be able to take it out later.
And when you say, like, for example, the collaboration piece, I've always been asking myself, does it make sense for some markets? Do we have too many incubators? Do we have too many accelerators? Do we need to merge some of these institutions for scale or for efficiency purposes, or even for just avoid the confusion? We only have 12 months in a year. We can't run 1,000 plus.
I am a bit torn on this. On the one hand, I do feel like there will be a consolidation at some point in the future, because I feel like that's how the industry matures. The good ones bubble to the top, the lesser quality ones sort of fizzle out. On the other hand, if you look at the sheer number of entrepreneurs we have, and if we're saying a good quality incubator can't possibly support 30 or 40 at a go, that they're looking at 10 or 15, then the need is immense. Do you know what I mean? Then we actually can't even service the needs of the entrepreneurs that are out there. So I don't know.
I get So you're saying let the number of incubators be sort of dictated by the
demand in the market.
The demand of entrepreneurs and enterprises that are being funneled into.
Rather than
as those die off or grow, then this would also sort itself out.
Because right now the ecosystem is driven and underpinned by the development institutions that are infusing the cash. Right? Rather than and it's what's sexy, right? What's sexy right now? Climate, gender. Okay, maybe oceans are like up and coming, right? Circularity. Yes, thank you. So is there demand? I mean, in circularity, in gender, is that what the entrepreneurs are demanding, or these are the things that we're trying that the donors are driving, or and I mean, I don't want to jump ahead, but it also comes down to how are you articulating that, because someone could be running a waste management business, or I don't know, creating products from what are those plants that grow in Lake Victoria? Thank you. Maybe they're making products from the water hyacinth, and they're actually doing something that's very ecologically friendly and whatever, but they don't self-identify as a circular entrepreneur, right? So I think we need to get to a better place where the market demands and the development demands that we're trying to meet are somehow connecting, because right now I feel like it's a mismatch, which again goes back to the hub hopping, which is why you sort of see the ones that are in the system circulating through the system, and then you have many entrepreneurs who are outside of that system who are good, they're viable, but they're not plugged in to that system, so they're not getting necessarily the support that they could.
And then also there's also the fact that for the incubators, we are also, I kind of ask myself, in terms of now sustainability, we are still I guess too donor dependent, and that also creates a limit to how you would still articulate your story. So I don't know if you're seeing is there hope or anything changing?
I don't know. These are questions that I feel like keep me up at night, right? Like, what does sustainability even mean?
Yeah.
If you can raise grants for your work, good on you.
Yeah.
Does that mean
like
you're
say
not sustainable?
if I am able to raise a grant that caps me 5 years of my budget, then
good on you.
I don't need to worry.
Right. That's, to me, that could be considered sustainable. Does sustainability equal commercial viability? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Does every incubator and accelerator need to be commercially viable? I don't think so. In the markets that we're operating in, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think what will change is the funding flows. Like you're saying, I think there's a significant dialogue already happening around shifting from program-based funding to building better institutions, right? And
so we are going to
longer
see either grants being open to funding operational
correct
costs rather than
longer term
projects.
correct. And they think the second half to that is the public funding. There are some places that I think are a bit ahead on this, but I think we're very much lacking in many places. But how is the public sector actually supporting some of this activity, whether that's financial or non-financial? But I think that's the other piece that really ultimately will need to come into play to create more stability for these organizations to thrive and be sustainable, whatever that means. Because the grant money, I mean, everyone's saying it will dry up. I think it shifts. I don't think it's a well that goes dry. I think it moves, and it's not.
It's a pipe that's
it's traveling. It's going different
like
ways.
A stream of water that's
carves its own. Carves its own. So I think that can be very difficult for organizations who've created a niche for themselves in a certain path, and then the river of funding sort of goes around that. Then that's a challenge.
And then for your situation, you've seen like West Africa, East Africa, Southeast Asia, and do you think there's what can we learn from, like, what's East Africa good at versus West Africa, and what can we and maybe even Southeast Asia?
I think someone asked me this, I think last week, like what's transferable, like what can be shared? Everything. I mean, from basic, I don't know that I could say any one region is particularly good at anything, but there are certain aspects that kind of crop up in terms of challenges that I think are unique that could really be applied elsewhere. So Francophone West Africa, in Indonesia, language came up as a big challenge, right? You're operating in global markets. Investors ultimately are
mostly Anglophone.
So you are automatically at a disadvantage if you're an entrepreneur that does not speak English. I know even at Sankal we did a session around this, and how is language actually restricting and kind of throttling the flow of pipeline, just because there's sort of a discomfort. I mean, I think there's a huge role for technology. I mean, now you can get hearing aids that translate. I mean, it's insane. So there's big gaps there that I think could be transferred definitely across regions, especially again with Southeast Asia. You look at how these island nations are very separate and kind of all over the place. So they have, we've talked about all these incubators in Nairobi, and now we're starting to see, they're in Kisumu, they're in Mombasa, they're in Voi, they're in Eldoret. So we're starting to see that here. You can imagine how much more difficult that is.
Island sort of.
Yeah, where geographies are physically actually separated. So how do you provide support to an entrepreneur in a remote island? How do you find a mentor or advisor who's accessible to that person where they're at in the language in which they are comfortable in communicating? So I think these are some of the things that I think have bubbled up that are interesting, and I think India has been doing some really interesting things in terms of how the government has been supporting incubation. The Telangana government, which is a state in India, they passed a policy where they don't do these government tenders anymore.
Really?
The government will be the first buyer of something for an entrepreneur. So instead of sort of being the last consumer of the product, if you have someone who's, created a straw that's biodegradable, but not these crappy paper straws where you feel like you're drinking paper by the end of your drink. The government will actually buy that as a supplier from these startup businesses. And I think that's a very progressive stand to take to support these businesses by being clients, right? And by being consumers of the product. And I think that,
because if you are to analyze, even for example in Kenya, you'd find even the way procurement is done, by the time you're done with the budget cycle, you've exported most of your money to some company in Silicon Valley or China.
Correct. Or someone sourcing from China.
So it's sort of if we would say, if that part of that value would be captured by local entrepreneurship or entrepreneurs, then that would be
that could be game changing
more than they would ask
for the economy, for the entrepreneurs, for the country. I mean, but it's a risk, right? Like that's I'm saying that's like a very progressive stance to take. But I think it's a very, very cool thing that I think it would be fantastic for other countries to learn from. And I know in India, other states are kind of following this keenly to see if that's something that they can also replicate. So there are these very nice things that are bubbling to the top that I think, if it's working in India, it can definitely work here. I think that South-South potential for sharing is far more powerful than looking at Silicon Valley and your Y Combinator models and
it's sometimes we sort of look without rather than within for our own solutions. So it's a good space to be.
It kind of takes me back to those days in Kilifi of how asset-based development, how can we look at the assets and the resources that we have internally before looking at, we don't have this, let's get it from China or Turkey.
So now you've mentioned a lot about what we can learn, but I think one important concept is the concept of storytelling. We have the advent of new technologies. We are being pushed further and further into a lot of fluff, a lot of noise. We can't even sifting through information, content. How do we do that sort of as I'm sure from the donor world they would get thousands of emails, proposals, all the push and pull kind of content. So for incubators, ESOs, even entrepreneurs, how do we be effective storytellers? For impact, for messaging, for partnerships, fundraising.
I think my first piece here is just to be authentic. I feel like a lot of the noise that's out there, a lot of the nonsense that's out there is not genuine. It's not authentic. And I think, putting a face to your work and really personifying actual stories of entrepreneurs that we're working with, there's nothing that compares to that. And I feel like it really brings you back to why you're doing what you're doing. I think the other piece of storytelling that is starting to come up, and I think this is much easier said than done, It actually came up, we were doing an incubator workshop in Manila in the Philippines, and they themselves said, you know, how do we do better storytelling as a collective, as incubators and accelerators in Manila, in the Philippines, rather than each individually.
Yeah.
And I think that's that's a really powerful idea, because again, that power and that value of the collective, once articulated, is almost something that it's a force to reckon with. It's not just one incubator supporting 10 entrepreneurs or 40 entrepreneurs, or it is now a systemic level change across the country, across the region, across the globe. I mean, how high do we want to go? And I think that when it comes to this advocacy piece, especially of how do we change the system and how do we influence the funding flows, it can't be one. It's going to have to be a collective effort. And that's really tough, because nobody's collecting the same metrics. Everyone is, especially incubators, is such a struggle, because you might be running a 4 or 6 month program. It takes years to build a business. And you might not realize the effect of what you've done for 18, 24 months from now. And by that time, by the way, the entrepreneur has probably gone through 4 or 5 other programs, right? So, and I think everyone should take credit. I'm not going to get into that, but it takes a village to raise a child. It's no different with entrepreneurs. We all take credit for the good that we've done. But it's tough. It's very tough. And it's worse because funding is funded for the program. But you're expected to report impact
long term.
For long term. And it takes a long time to realize that effect. So, you know, I don't have an answer. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I think
that's pretty good. Authenticity, and then like sort of collective storytelling. You know, more of sectoral, big picture. And then personalizing your stories with either the clients, the customers, the partners you work with yourself. So that's interesting, and I think thank you for your time. Happy to keep tabs on what Pollinate Impact is doing. As always, I'll be a champion of your work, and looking forward to to seeing more and more incubators be more stronger and more effective in what they're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.